Dr. Laura Mitchell had spent 15 years of her life studying something that everyone told her was a waste of time. She worked alone in her small laboratory aboard the research station called Horizon's Edge, which floated in orbit around a giant planet far from Earth. The year was 2347, and humanity had been part of the Galactic Consaual for almost 200 years. The Consaual was a government of alien species. There were 847 different kinds of aliens in it. They had ruled the galaxy for thousands and thousands of years. Humans were the newest members, and the aliens never let them forget it. They treated humans like children who had just learned to walk. They gave humans 12 small colony worlds and told them to be grateful. Laura never accepted this. She believed that humans were special in a way that nobody understood yet. Her research focused on something strange that she had found in human brains. There was a pattern hidden deep inside human neural pathways that no other species had. The Velthri, who were the oldest and most powerful aliens, had studied the brain for 50,000 years. But they had never seen anything like what Laura found in humans. Her colleague, Dr. Nathan Cole, had visited her laboratory many years ago. He looked at her research and shook his head. He told her she was throwing away her career on nonsense. He said the Velthri knew everything about consciousness, and humans could never discover something new. Laura thanked him for his opinion and went back to work. Now, after 15 years, her latest experiment gave her the answer she'd been looking for. The data on her screen made her hands shake. She had to read it 3 times to make sure she was not dreaming. The pattern in human brains was not just different from other species. It was incomplete. Human minds were like seeds that had never been given water. They were waiting to grow into something amazing. Laura contacted Earth immediately. She sent her findings to the Scientific Council and asked them to send their best researchers. Within 3 weeks, a ship arrived at Horizon's Edge carrying the most brilliant scientists humanity had. Among them was Dr. Samuel Gray, a brain scientist whose ideas had been laughed at by universities for years. There was also Dr. Helen Price, who studied quantum physics and believed that thoughts could affect reality. They gathered in Laura's laboratory and looked at her data. Samuel sat in silence for a long time. Then he looked up with tears in his eyes. He told Laura that she had found something that changed everything about what it is. It's meant to be human. The team worked together for months. They built a machine that could send special quantum signals into the brain. These signals would activate the dormant parts of human neural pathways. They would water the seed and let it grow, but they needed someone brave enough to be the first to try it. A young researcher named Daniel Brooks volunteered. He was 28 years old and had joined Laura's team just 6 months ago. He told them he believed in what they were doing. He said that if there was even a small chance that this could help humanity, he wanted to be part of it. They prepared Daniel for the procedure. He lay down on a medical bed while machines hummed around him. Laura stood at the control panel with her heart beating fast. She asked Daniel one more time if he was sure. He smiled and told her to begin. The machine activated. Quantum fields surrounded Daniel's head, stimulating the hidden pathways in his brain. For 30 seconds, nothing seemed to happen. Then the monitors went crazy. Daniel's brain activity increased by a factor of 10,000. Numbers scrolled across the screens faster than anyone could read them. Daniel opened his eyes. Laura rushed to his side and asked if he was okay. Daniel sat up slowly and looked around the room. But he was not just looking at the room. He was looking at everything. He could see the atoms in the walls. He could feel the spin of electrons in the machines. He could hear the radio signals passing through the station from ships, light years away. He told Laura that he could see it all now. Every particle, every wave, every possibility. He said that humans had been sleeping, and now he was awake. Over the next few hours, Daniel showed them what he could do. He held out his hand and created a small ball of light from nothing. He told them exactly what was happening on Earth at that moment, even though Earth was hundreds of light years away. He solved mathematical problems in seconds that would take the best computers. Years to finish, the team watched in amazement and fear. They had expected something unusual. They had not expected this. Daniel had become something beyond human. He had become something that the galaxy had never seen before. But Daniel was not frightening. He was calm and kind, the same person he had always been. He told Laura that the transformation did not erase who he was. It expanded him. He could feel connections to everything in the universe, and those connections filled him with peace and purpose. Word spread quickly. Other humans wanted to undergo the procedure. Laura and her team worked carefully, testing each volunteer to make sure they were healthy enough for the transformation. One by one, humans awakened to their true potential. They called it the awakening. Within 6 months, thousands of humans had transformed. Within a year, half of all humans in the galaxy had become awakened. Each one gained incredible powers. They could move objects with their minds. They could travel instantly across vast distances. They could communicate without words, sharing thoughts and feelings directly. The awakened did not become monsters or tyrants. They remained human in their hearts. They helped the humans who had not yet transformed. They built new technologies that made life better for everyone. They healed diseases that had plagued humanity for centuries. But not everyone was happy about the awakening. The alien species of the Galactic. Consaual watched what was happening to humanity with growing fear. For 100,000 years, they had been the masters of the galaxy. The Velthari could manipulate energy. The Kathrani had minds that worked together as one. The Torathi were made of crystal and could live in space without protection. Now humans could do all of these things and more. The balance of power that had existed for ages was falling apart. The species who had once looked down on humanity now looked up at them with terror in their hearts. Laura Mitchell stood in her laboratory and watched the stars through her window. She had awakened 3 months ago, and now she could feel the fear spreading through the galaxy like ripples in water. She knew that difficult times were coming. The Consaual would not accept this change peacefully, but she also knew that humanity would face whatever came. They were no longer sleeping. They were no longer children. They had become something new, something powerful, something wonderful. The first chapter of humanity's true story had just begun. The Great Hall of Nexus Prime was the oldest building in the galaxy. It had stood for more than 100,000 years, and the leaders of every major species had gathered there to make decisions that shaped history. The walls were made of a metal that no living being knew how to create anymore. The ceiling rose so high that clouds sometimes formed inside. Today, the hall was filled with fear. High Arbiter Zethkal of the Velthari Dominion stood at the central platform. His body was made of pure energy that glowed with soft blue light. He was over 3,000 years old and had led the Consaual through many crises. But he had never faced anything like this. Representatives from all 847 member species filled the seats around him. Some were tall and thin like trees. Some were short and round like boulders. Some floated in tanks of liquid. Some existed as clouds of gas held together by magnetic fields. They were all different. But today, they all shared the same emotion. They were afraid of humans. Zethkal raised his hand and the hall fell silent. He spoke in a voice that carried to every corner of the vast room. He said that humanity had broken the natural order of things. They had achieved in a few months what should take millions of years. This was wrong. This was dangerous. This could not be allowed to continue, the representatives murmured in agreement. Their fear made them hungry for someone to blame. Ambassador Patricia Lane stood alone at the human delegation's platform. She was one of the few humans who had not yet undergone the awakening. She had chosen to remain unchanged so she could continue her work as a diplomat. She knew that the awakened scared the aliens, and she hoped that her normal human appearance might help calm their fears. It was not working. Patricia stepped forward and asked permission to speak. Zethkal granted it with a wave of his glowing hand. She looked out at the sea of alien faces and tried to find the right words. She told them that the awakening was not a weapon. It was not a trick or a violation of any law. It was simply the natural expression of human potential. Humans had always known there was something special about their minds. Now they had found a way to unlock it. They meant no harm to anyone. Counselor Drexenel of the Kathrani Collective interrupted her. The Kathrani were insect-like beings who shared thoughts with each other through a mental network. Drexenel spoke with the voice of millions. He called Patricia a liar. He said that no species could evolve so quickly without cheating. Humans must have used forbidden technology. They had broken the covenant of limitations that all Consaual members had promised to follow. Patricia kept her voice calm, even though her heart was racing. She explained that humans had not broken any rules. The covenant forbade the use of certain dangerous technologies, like weapons that could destroy stars or machines that could create black holes. The awakening used none of these things. It simply activated what was already inside human brains. But the aliens did not want to hear explanations. They wanted someone to punish. Patricia understood their real fear. For thousands of years, the elder races had kept their power because they were stronger and smarter than everyone else. The Velthri could bend energy to their will. The Kathrani could think as one mind. The crystalline Tarathi could survive in the cold emptiness of space. These abilities made them special. These abilities made them rulers. Now humans could do everything the elder races could do, and more. A single awakened human had more power than entire fleets of alien warships. The old balance was gone. The elder races were no longer the strongest beings in the galaxy, and that terrified them. Zethkal announced that the Consaual would vote on sanctions against humanity. Humans would be ordered to stop all awakening procedures immediately. Those who had already transformed would submit to a process that would reduce their powers. If humans refused, they would be thrown out of the Consaual and cut off from all trade and communication. Patricia sent the demands to Earth through her communication device. She expected to wait hours or days for a response. Instead, an answer came within minutes, but it did not come from the human government. A holographic image appeared in the center of the Great Hall. It was Dr. Laura Mitchell, the scientist who had discovered the awakening. She had transformed months ago and was now one of the most powerful beings in existence. Her image glowed with soft light. Her presence made several alien species back away in fear. Laura spoke in a calm and gentle voice. She told the Consaual that their sanctions did not matter. Humanity no longer needed alien trade networks. Humanity no longer needed alien protection. The awakening would continue because it was the right of every human being to reach their full potential. Zethkal's energy form flickered with anger. He told Laura that if humanity rejected the sanctions, they were choosing war. Laura's expression remained peaceful. She said that humanity was not choosing anything. They simply existed as they were now. But she warned the High Arbiter to think carefully. If the Consaual attacked humanity, they would discover that the gap between their species had grown beyond anything they could imagine. The hologram faded away. The Great Hall erupted in chaos. Alien representatives shouted at each other. Some demanded immediate military action. Others begged for more time to negotiate. Zethkal restored order with a pulse of energy that shook the walls. He announced that the Consaual had no choice. They would assemble a fleet and force humanity to submit. If humans would not accept limits on their power willingly, those limits would be imposed by force across the galaxy. The military forces of 90 different species began preparing for war. Ships that had sat idle for 10,000 years were brought back into service. Weapons that had been sealed away were unsealed. Soldiers who had never known combat trained for battles against an enemy unlike any they had faced. Before Patricia Lane watched the preparations from her small apartment on Nexus Prime, she had done everything she could to prevent this. She had argued and pleaded and explained. None of it had mattered. Fear had won. She looked out her window at the stars and wondered what would happen when the fleet reached human space. She wondered if there would even be a galaxy left when the fighting ended. She wondered if she should have awakened after all, so that she could at least understand what humanity had become. The first shots of the war had not been fired yet, but Patricia knew in her heart that something terrible was coming, something that would change everything. The fleet that gathered at the edge of human space was the largest military force the galaxy had ever seen. 12,000 warships from 90 different species stretched across millions of kilometers. Their weapons could crack planets open like eggs. Their shields could withstand the heat of stars. They represented the combined might of civilizations that had ruled the cosmos for 100,000 years. Admiral Crixveth stood on the command deck of his flagship, the Eternal Mandate. He was Velthary, like the High Arbiter, and his energy form burned with fierce red light. He had commanded fleets for 500 years and had never lost a battle. He did not intend to start losing now. His officers reported that all ships were in position. The fleet was ready to advance into human territory. Crixveth gave the order to move forward. The ships crossed the border and flew toward the first human colony world. But when they arrived, they found nothing. The colony was empty. The buildings stood silent. The streets were bare. No humans anywhere. Crixveth ordered his scouts to search the area. They found the same thing at the next colony and the next. Every human world they visited was abandoned. Ships floated empty in space. Stations had been left behind like discarded toys. Where had all the humans gone? The admiral felt a cold fear growing in his mind, but he pushed it away. He ordered the fleet to continue toward Earth, the human homeworld. Whatever was happening, the answers would be there. They traveled for days through empty space. No human ships challenged them. No human weapons fired at them. It was like the entire species had simply disappeared. Then they reached Earth. The blue and green planet hung in space, as beautiful and peaceful. But between the fleet and the planet, something waited for them. A single human being. He floated in the vacuum of space without a ship. He had no spacesuit, no helmet, no protection of any kind. He simply hung there, a tiny figure against the vast darkness. Facing 12,000 warships alone, his name was Christopher Wells. Before the awakening, he had been a schoolteacher in a small town called Millbrook. He had taught children about history and science and mathematics. He had coached the school baseball team. He had lived a quiet, ordinary life. Now he was something far beyond ordinary. Christopher's voice reached every ship in the fleet simultaneously. He did not use radio or any technology the aliens recognized. His words simply appeared in their minds. He told them that they had entered human space with plans to hurt his people. He said that he was there to give them one chance to turn around and leave peacefully. He asked them to take this chance. Admiral Crixveth laughed. The sound echoed through his command deck and made his officers uncomfortable. He opened a channel to the human and asked if this was some kind of joke. One man against 12,000 warships? Human arrogance truly had no limits. Christopher did not argue. He did not make threats. He simply said that he wanted them to understand something. Then they could make their choice. He raised his hand. The nearest Velthary cruiser was 3 kilometers long. It had a crew of 8,000 soldiers. It carried weapons that could destroy cities. It had shields that could block nuclear explosions. In one instant, it ceased to exist. The ship did not explode. It did not break apart. It simply was not there anymore. Every atom that had made up the vessel and its crew scattered into the universe like dust in the wind. The process took less than a heartbeat. One moment there was a mighty warship. The next moment there was empty space. Across the fleet, alarms screamed. Officers shouted in confusion and terror. Sensors showed impossible readings. Some ships began to back away without orders. Christopher spoke again. His voice was heavy with sadness. He told them that the ship had carried 8,000 living beings, and he had not wanted to harm them. But the fleet needed to understand what they were facing. The awakening had not just made humans stronger, it had connected them to the basic forces of reality itself. Awakened humans could create matter from nothing. They could destroy anything with a thought. They could reshape the universe itself. He paused and let his words sink into their minds. Christopher told them to leave now. No more lives would be lost. He told them to continue their attack, and the entire fleet would disappear, just like that cruiser. The choice was theirs. Admiral Crixveth stared at the empty space where his cruiser had been. His tactical officers were babbling about broken physics and impossible energy readings. His crew was on the edge of panic. Some had already abandoned their posts and were running for the escape pods. The admiral had spent 500 years winning battles. He had destroyed enemies that seemed invincible. He had conquered worlds and crushed rebellions. He had believed that nothing in the universe could stand against the combined might of the Consaual. He had been wrong. Krixveth gave the order that he had never given before in his long career. He told all ships to reverse course. He told them to return to Consaual space immediately. He told them to retreat. 12,000 warships turned around and fled from a single human being. Christopher watched them go. He felt no pride in what he had done. 8,000 people had died because of fear and misunderstanding. He hoped their deaths would be enough to prevent more killing. He hoped the Consaual would finally understand that war against humanity was not possible, but deep in his heart, he knew that fear did not surrender easily. The aliens would try again. They would find some other way to attack. They would keep fighting until they finally accepted that the galaxy had changed forever. He turned and looked at Earth, the planet where humanity had been born so long ago. His family lived there. His former students lived there. Billions of ordinary people lived there, going about their ordinary lives, not knowing how close they had come to destruction. Christopher made a silent promise to protect them. Whatever came next, whatever the Consaual tried, he and the other awakened would keep humanity safe. The largest fleet in galactic history returned home in shame and terror. And across the cosmos, the elder races realized that their time as masters of the galaxy was over. Something new had risen, something they could not control, something that called itself human. The secret station floated in the darkness between stars where no one ever traveled. It had no name and appeared on no maps. Only the highest leaders of the Consaual knew it existed. High Arbiter Zethkal had not slept in weeks. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw that Vel-3 cruiser disappearing into nothing. He saw the face of the human who had done it without effort, like a child crushing an insect. The memory filled him with a fear deeper than anything he had ever known. The other leaders gathered around a table made of black stone. They had all seen the recordings from the fleet. They had all watched one human destroy a warship with a wave of his hand. None of them could pretend any more that humans were just another species. Counselor Drexenol of the Kethrani spoke first. His insect-like body clicked and buzzed as he moved. He said that they had to destroy humanity before humanity destroyed them. A single attack would not work. They all knew that now. But there was another way. The other leaders leaned forward to listen. Drexenol explained his plan. The humans were powerful, yes, but they still needed their sun. Earth orbited a yellow star that gave the planet light and heat and life. Without that star, Earth would die. And without Earth, humanity's heart would be broken. He proposed using the Sunbreaker. The room went silent. Everyone knew about the Sunbreaker, but no one spoke of it. It was the Consaual's ultimate weapon, built 50,000 years ago during a war that had nearly destroyed everything. The device could reach into a star's core and tear it apart, causing it to explode with enough force to wipe out an entire solar system. The Sunbreaker had been sealed away after the war ended. The leaders of that time had agreed that such a weapon was too terrible to use. They had hidden it and sworn that it would never be activated. Now, Drexenol wanted to break that promise. Ambassador Yethal of the Tarathi objected. Her crystalline body shimmered with troubled colors. She said that using the Sunbreaker against Earth would kill billions of innocent people. It would be the greatest act of murder in history. How could they live with such a crime? Drexenol replied coldly. He said that if they did not use the weapon, the humans would eventually destroy them all. This was not murder, he argued. This was survival. This was the only choice they had. Zethkal listened to the debate with his heart heavy. He remembered when he had first met human ambassadors 200 years ago. They had seemed so eager and friendly, so excited to join the community of galactic civilizations. He had thought of them as harmless children. Now those children had become gods. The High Arbiter made his decision. He ordered the Sunbreaker to be activated. He told himself that he was protecting the galaxy. He told himself that humanity had forced this choice. He tried not to think about the billions who would die. A team of Kethrani engineers traveled to the hidden location where the Sunbreaker was stored. The weapon was old but still worked perfectly. They set its target for Earth's sun and began the countdown. In 12 hours, the star would explode and humanity's homeworld would be burned to ashes. The engineer sent confirmation back to the secret station. Drexenel allowed himself to feel hope for the first time in months. Soon the threat would be over. Soon the galaxy would be safe again. Then Dr. Laura Mitchell appeared in the room. She did not use a door or a teleporter. She simply existed where she had not existed a moment before. Her presence filled the space with power that made the air feel thick and heavy. The leaders scrambled away from her in terror. Guards raised their weapons but did not fire. Everyone knew that weapons were useless against the awakened. Laura looked at them with eyes that seemed to see through their bodies and into their souls. She spoke in a voice that was calm but carried weight like mountains. She told them that she had felt their weapon activate. She said that every awakened human had sensed it the moment it powered on. They knew exactly where it was and exactly what it was meant to do. Zethkol tried to speak, but his voice would not work. He had never felt so small and helpless in his 3,000 years of life, Laura continued. She told them that the awakened could destroy the Sunbreaker with a thought. They could unmake every being in this room before anyone could blink. They could hunt down every member of the Consaual who had agreed to this plan and scatter their atoms across the galaxy. She paused, but they would not do any of those things. The leaders stared at her in confusion. Why not? They had just tried to commit genocide. Why would she show them mercy? Laura explained. She said that the awakened remembered what it was like to be afraid. For 200 years, humanity had lived in the shadow of the elder races. They had been dismissed and mocked and treated as nothing. That fear had shaped them. And now that they had power, they did not want to become the thing they had once feared. She waved her hand, and a holographic display appeared. It showed the Sunbreaker powering down, shut off by awakened minds reaching across the light years. Laura told them that their weapon was neutralized. Their fleet was broken. Their secrets were exposed. Humanity could conquer them easily, but conquest would make humans into tyrants. Humanity could destroy them completely, but destruction would make humans into monsters instead. She offered them something else. She told them that the awakening was not limited to humans. The potential that humans had unlocked existed in every thinking species. It was hidden, waiting for the right key to open it. Humanity could share this gift with everyone. They could lift all beings to the next level of existence, but only if the Consaual chose to accept it freely. Zethkal finally found his voice. He asked what would happen if they refused. Laura answered simply. She said that if the Consaual rejected the gift, humanity would leave them in peace. The awakened would go somewhere else, beyond the Consaual's borders, to continue their journey. The galaxy was vast, and there were wonders waiting that the elder races could not imagine. But humans would not force anyone to change. That would be the worst crime of all. She looked at each leader in turn. Their ancient pride fought against the truth that stood before them. They had spent their whole lives believing they were the greatest beings in the universe. Now they had to accept that they were not. That acceptance was harder than any battle. Laura told them to take time and think about what she had said. She told them that the choice was theirs. Then she disappeared as suddenly as she had appeared. The leader sat in silence for a long time. The station felt empty without her presence. The fear that had driven them to activate the Sunbreaker now seemed foolish and small. Finally, Zethkal spoke. He said that they had much to consider. He said that perhaps they had been wrong about humanity all along. The reckoning had come. And now, the galaxy had to decide what kind of future it wanted. 100 years had passed since the day Laura Mitchell appeared in the secret station and offered the galaxy a choice. 100 years of change, of growth, of transformation beyond anything the universe had ever seen. The Galactic Consaual no longer existed. In its place stood something new, something better, something called the Communion of Minds. It was not a government of separate species competing for power. It was a family of awakened beings working together toward goals that their ancestors could never have imagined. The change had come slowly at first. Fear does not disappear overnight, and the elder races had thousands of years of pride to overcome. But curiosity is a powerful force. One by one, individuals from different species asked to learn about the awakening. They wanted to understand what humans had become. The first non-human to transform was a young, Torathi scientist named Crystalline Harmony. She had studied human brain patterns for years and believed that her people might be compatible with the process. When she underwent the awakening, her crystalline body blazed with light so bright that it could be seen from orbit. She gained powers equal to any human, and she used those powers to help her people understand that they had nothing to fear. After that, more species joined. The Kathrani, whose minds already worked as one, found that the awakening made their connection even deeper and more beautiful. The Velthari, who had manipulated energy for millennia, discovered that their old abilities were like candles compared to the sun of their new powers. Even the strangest species, beings of gas and liquid, in pure thought, found that the gift worked for them too. High Arbiter Zethkal was among the first of the Velthari to transform. He had spent decades feeling guilty about the Sunbreaker, about the fear that had driven him to almost destroy an entire species. The awakening did not erase that guilt, but it helped him understand it. He spent the rest of his long life working to build bridges between species that had once been enemies. Dr. Laura Mitchell watched all of this with joy in her heart. She was old now by human standards, but the awakening had given her a lifespan beyond counting. She had seen humanity rise from frightened newcomers to guides for the entire galaxy. She had seen hatred transform into friendship and fear transform into wonder. Now she stood on the observation deck of a structure. It could not exist according to normal physics. It occupied multiple dimensions at once, a cathedral built from thought and energy and pure mathematics. This was the central meeting place of the communion, where beings from every awakened species could gather to share ideas and dreams. Zethkal stood beside her. His energy form had changed over the century. He no longer burned with angry red light. Instead, he glowed with colors that had no names in any language, colors that only awakened minds could see and understand. He told Laura that he remembered, calling her transformation an abomination. He had been so certain that humanity had violated the natural order. He could not see that evolution was not always slow. Sometimes it arrived all at once, like a lightning bolt that changed everything in a single flash. Laura smiled at her old adversary who had become her dear friend. She told him that fear made fools of everyone, but wisdom came from walking through fear, not running away from it. Below them, the communion gathered for a special event. This was the moment that humanity had been preparing for since the first awakening, over a century ago. The transformed beings had learned so much about reality, they could see the structure of the universe itself, the currents of existence that flowed between galaxies and across the boundaries between dimensions, and they had found something remarkable beyond the edge of known space. Beyond the walls that separated one universe from another, other realms waited. Some held minds that made the awakened look like children. Some held challenges that would test even godlike powers. And somewhere out there, answers waited for questions that beings had asked since the beginning of time. Why did the universe exist? What was the purpose of consciousness? What lay at the end of infinity? Christopher Wells stepped forward to address the communion. He was still the same person he had been when he taught children in a small-town school. The power had not changed his heart. He still spoke simply and clearly, without grand words or dramatic gestures. He reminded them of how far they had come. When humanity first left Earth and reached the stars, they were small and scared. They built weapons because they expected enemies everywhere. They fought for resources because they believed there was not enough for everyone. They feared the unknown because they could not imagine anything beyond their tiny understanding. The awakening had changed all of that. Humans discovered that the universe was not a place of scarcity, but of endless abundance. They learned that consciousness was not trapped in bodies, but could grow beyond all limits. They found that true power came not from domination, but from connection with others. Christopher told them that today they would take the next step, not as humans alone, not as separate species, but as one communion united in purpose. They would cross into the unknown. They would seek answers to the deepest questions, and whatever they found, they would face it together. The communion moved as one being. Reality parted before them like a curtain opening on a stage. Beyond the curtain lay vistas of impossible beauty. Stars shone in colors that no eye had ever seen. Structures built by minds that had ascended millions of years ago floated in seas of pure energy. Patterns of light danced with meaning and purpose that the communion could almost understand. Laura Mitchell paused at the threshold. She looked back at the galaxy that had been humanity's cradle. It seemed so small now, so fragile, so incredibly precious. In that galaxy, new species were still being born. Children were still taking their first steps. The story of life was still being written, one moment at a time. She whispered a promise. They would return. When they had found what they were looking for, when they had learned what they needed to learn, they would come back home. The journey might take centuries or millennia. They would return. Then she stepped forward into the light. Behind her, the galaxy continued to spin. Planets orbited their suns. Life grew and changed, and reached for the stars. The universe that had seemed so vast and cold was now filled with warmth and wonder and hope. Humanity had started as a small species on a small planet, afraid of the darkness between the stars. They had become something greater than they ever dreamed possible. And now, hand in hand with all the species they had once feared, they walked into a future without limits. The new dawn had arrived, and it was only the beginning.